Good evening. Welcome to Legacy Battle. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel and make sure that you join the Facebook group. That's where you can win those trivia question prizes if you're a member of the Facebook group. I am Michael Adams, creator of Legacy Battle. Here with me tonight from the Gridiron Battle Zone, Brian King, Penn State Collegiate All-Star, Kevin Adams, and of course, we're happy to have Brett Ebert back. We're joined by a special guest tonight. He was the 9th pick overall in the 1990 NFL Draft. He's a 7-time Pro Bowler. He's a member of the 1990s All-Decade Team for the NFL. He's a member of the Miami Dolphins Honor Roll. And he's a 2-time First Team and 2-time Second Team All-Pro. Ladies and gentlemen, Richmond Webb.
Hey, guys. How y'all doing tonight?
Good. We're happy to have you here.
Yes, thank you.
You know, having the Dolphins, that's pretty close to our hometown up here. All of us based out of Tampa.
Okay.
So that's good. Tonight's debate is going to be the greatest single season of NFL offense. And as always, afterwards, we'll have a Q&A with Richmond about his career and see what he has some stories to tell us about some of those days with Dan Marino, I'm sure. So we're going to jump in tonight, starting with the 2007 New England Patriots.
All right. So it almost goes, I always have to say this, almost goes against my religion to really pump up a Boston team. But, hey, I can't deny this team or what they're about. We're talking about basically could be argued the GOAT, the greatest quarterback to ever play, arguably. With Tom Brady on the team, this was pretty much right as his career started to hit its prime, with Belichick as the coach. And you just look at some of the figures from that year that they set. A couple were broken later on, but I mean, you look at they scored 589 points in a season, which set the NFL record at the time. They just blew by people. They ended up scoring something like 8 straight games where they scored 34 or more points to start the season, which is just kind of crazy. But after that point, Brady, he set the NFL record at the time for the season with 50 touchdown passes. He had just a little over 4,800 yards passing. And then something that makes this interesting about this team is you look at their running backs, and their running backs weren't any names that are going to just blow off the page necessarily, with Lawrence Maroney, and they had Sammy Morris. These were guys who were capable and could do the job, but nothing that kind of jumped off the page like some of the other offenses we might talk about tonight. But then you look at his wide receivers. I mean, again, you're going to argue Randy Moss, I would say one of the top 5 wide receivers of all time. And that year he set the NFL record, which I think still stands at 23 touchdown catches that year, which is just unbelievable when it comes to that day and age of the NFL too, whereas now it's all run and gun, or all throw downfield as much as we can. And then Wes Welker led the league in catches that year, had 112 catches, just that slot receiver that we know Brady loves to use on his team. And to touch on the coach, we all know Belichick, third most winningest coach of all time. Most Super Bowls ever won by a head coach. You can't really argue with his production and what he does with his teams. So again, that season, not only was their offense amazing, they had a pretty decent defense, not the greatest, but it got them through. But it got them through to a 16-0 season. Got to the playoffs. Didn't struggle too much in the first 2 rounds, and then of course, probably one of the famous catches of all time, ends up taking the Patriots down in the Super Bowl. Eli Manning to can't remember the wide receiver, but the helmet catch
David Tyree.
There we go.
Tyree,
Yeah, that's right. It was Tyree. That's right. I couldn't remember the name, but yeah, the helmet catch and takes down the Giant that year. Funny enough, too, I read a stat that said like the 4 teams that have ever gone like undefeated in a season, 3 of them have lost the Super Bowl or not made it to the Super Bowl, which is kind of interesting, almost like a curse that you talk about in other sports. But again, they scored 30 plus points in all but like 4 games that year. It's just really hard to argue with that type of production as far as could they be one of the greatest offenses of all time? And then you add in the players that they had, the coach, and again, in my view, they can easily be argued to be one of the top, if not the top. And anybody wants to chime in and debate a little?
Well, they had a very underrated tight end too, Ben Watson. I mean, that guy made key catches. I mean, he wasn't Gronk or I guess the name that should never be mentioned, Aaron Hernandez, as far as, the yardage he's going to put up. But he was that guy on third down. If Welker wasn't open, like Ben Watson's name was coming up big, making a big catch, very underrated tight end. But so Richmond, this is obviously was a great team. Like Brett said, they went 16-0. Not only just offensively, but is Brady to Moss maybe the greatest single season combination duo in history?
That would be in a single season. If you took a single season, you probably could make that argument. I can remember, and it's going back a little bit, but Montana and Rice probably had some years. Steve Young, Rice probably had some years, and I know Duper and Clayton was with. I can't remember who had the most touchdowns, but I think that was around 83. He threw for over almost 5,000 yards or something. But I remember that season, and Randy Moss, and it was some deep passes consistently. It seemed like they was going deep, and they were connecting, and they really had chemistry going. So without question, that was in a single season. It would be hard. You'd have a very good argument. I mean, you could compare some, but that's definitely one of the top duos as far as quarterback receiver combination. Yeah, I'd agree with you on that.
Brian, no 1,000-yard rusher on that team. Does that hurt them a little bit as far as being the greatest of all time?
Well, they didn't need it. I mean, the way that they were going down the field, the way that there was so many options for Brady. One thing that's kind of understated about that, when you look at Brady's career path before that season, he had the 3 Super Bowl wins, but people, were sort of a little bit throwing shade at Brady at that time, saying that, the defenses carried him to the Super Bowl. But that year, it was all him and that offense. And he definitely threw away that, any shade that anybody had at that point.
We're talking about the greatest of all time. It's Tom Brady. They call him the GOAT,
Yeah.
So that's going to be a tough team to beat tonight.
Just to quickly add on, just real quick to add on to that, that was the same thing being said about Moss, Randy Moss. A lot of people said that he didn't have the speed anymore, the jump, and they kind of wrote him off as he's just going to finish his career in New England, and look what happened. So,
yeah, I think that was another guy that on our last show I talked about Marcus Allen and what Al Davis kind of did to him, and I think that kind of rubbed off on Randy Moss a little bit too when he was out there in Oakland. I'm not sure how well him and Al Davis got along, but so let's move to our next team. It's going to be the 2000 Rams, and that's going to be represented by myself. So this was the second year of what was called the greatest show on turf. I know Kevin over there is probably going to claim that the 99 team was better, but statistically speaking, the 2000 team was better. They led the league with 540 points. They were averaging 33.7 points a game, and they scored 35 points or more 9 times that season. And only 3 teams in history had done that before up to that point. So, looking at that team offensively, you got to start with the MVP of the NFL that year, Marshall Faulk. Hall of Famer, obviously. He ran for over 200 yards 2 times that year, 1,359 yards overall. Plus, he caught for another 830 yards. So we're talking over 2,000 yards combined. And he scored a league high 26 touchdowns. That is an insane number of touchdowns for one player. And he won 18 NFL awards that season for his play. Obviously, the biggest one being the NFL MVP, but he won several others. So the Rams, they led the league in 14 offensive categories that season, and they set NFL records for passing yards and combined net yards gained. So quite an offense. And that passing game came from actually 2 guys that year, because Kurt Warner was hurt for a little bit during that season. So you had Kurt Warner, Hall of Famer, and his backup, Trent Green, who was a very serviceable quarterback to be backing him up. And they both had won 2 weekly honors each during the season. Combined, they led the league with 37 touchdown passes and 5,492 yards passing. So that's a heck of a year. And we're going all the way back to 2000, where the pass interference rules, not like they are today. And there was a little more bumping allowed back in the day, so it was even harder to get that done. And you go over to wide receivers, you got Torrey Holt. He had a career year with over 1,600 yards. Isaac Bruce had over 1,400 yards. And then there are 3-4 guys. You got Ricky Proel and Azahir Hakeem. They chipped in over 1,100 yards combined and 8 touchdowns. So just 4 very good wide receivers. And Hakeem, I mean, he went to the Pro Bowl for special teams that year, kick return, punt return guy. You look at the Hall of Famers on his team. You got Warner, Falk, Bruce, Orlando Pace. I'm sure Richmond down there, might have something to say about Orlando. And, Torrey Holt's I think he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. He's on the Hall of Fame ballot. I don't think he was a finalist this year coming up, but I do believe he will get in one day. Sometimes it takes a while to get in. And, Orlando Pace, this guy is considered one of the greatest offensive linemen of all time. It's hard to not mention him. Linemen don't get all the cred that the quarterback's going to get or the wide receiver's going to get. But without these guys, without guys like Richmond Webb, Orlando Pace, your quarterback is dead. You go online, you Google Richmond Webb, you're going to find 10 different things of Dan Marino saying, this guy was my bodyguard. So that's how important an offensive lineman is. And the Rams that year had 3 linemen that were not penalized the entire season for holding. So that is a pretty impressive stat all in itself. Just a great offense. Richmond, Orlando Pace, what can you tell us about him?
That guy there solidified that position for them. I can remember even before he came in the league, and he was at Ohio State, just a great player and one of the best to ever do it, left tackle. So you always look at the guys that, play your position and are considered one of the top guys at the position. But came in a few years after me, but I always admired the way he put it down on Sundays. Like you said, he's one of the best. And when you got, Kurt Warner or even Trent Green, he had got injured and stuff. But when you got a quarterback, like Kurt Warner, that's putting up the numbers and spreading the football, and as much as they threw the football, it's amazing. Like you said, 3 linemen don't have any penalties. That's amazing, because I remember they aired it out, but they looked like they had fun. I believe the first year Mike Morris might have been the offense coordinator. He took over as the head coach, but just a great group of guys that went out, had fun, and was, excelled at so many positions that you couldn't just say, well, we're going to take this guy at the game and we got a chance to win. They had multiple weapons, and I think that's why they earned the nickname, the greatest show on turf.
Right on. Kevin, is Marshall Faulk the best running back that we're talking about tonight out of all these offenses, of the 4 offenses we're going to debate? Is he the best running back, you think?
Out of all the teams that we're talking about, I would have to say yes. I mean, he's put up monster numbers multiple seasons. And if I'm not mistaken, even that season, 2000, he had, I think it was 2 games over 200 yards. By far, he's definitely one of the best running backs to play the game. So yeah, I would agree to say yes, he is the best out of the teams that we're talking about today.
Okay. Brian or Brett, either one of you guys can take this one. The turnovers, there were quite a few interceptions from Kurt Warner. Is that kind of maybe taint them a little bit for greatest offense of all time?
I mean, personally, I think so. Yeah, because actually, if you look at the all-time leaders in fumbles, Kurt Warner is up there near the top, of anybody ever. And so, that was one of the Achilles heels of this team. And then if you look at what happened to them in the playoffs, that was ultimately their undoing.
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt. Richmond, I'm sure you're probably a little familiar with Kurt Warner's story, coming, he's bagging groceries and then he's in the NFL. That's quite a story. Did you play with any players that had, just basically came off the street and were just incredible once they got there?
I played with some guys that were probably free agents. I remember, I want to say it was a running back that kind of works in a warehouse or something he was with the Detroit Lions, but if I'm not mistaken, I think Bernie Parmalee, he played at Ball State, but maybe in between he worked for UPS or something and got an opportunity to come to the Dolphins and was a great special teams player. And we had some injuries at running back and he came in and I think for the rest of the season, he rushed for, I want to say at least about 800 yards, and it wasn't a complete season, but he did that and played on all the special teams and all that. So you always, are happy for guys like that because they're getting an opportunity to play, probably a childhood dream. And, once you've been in the NFL, you know how hard it is. But if you're a journeyman or if you're a guy that's a low-round draft pick or free agency, you almost got to be in the right place at the right time to just get a look or maybe some injuries. Another guy you look at, I think Terrell Davis, he's a Hall of Fame running back, but when he came in, he was playing special teams and then 2 or 3 guys ahead of him got hurt. And next thing you know, he rushes for 2,000 yards back to back. So a lot of times it's just getting that opportunity to showcase what you can do. So you always hats off to guys like Kurt Warner, stuff like that. So those stories are great for the NFL.
And that just shows the commitment that the players have that aren't in the league but want to get back in it, that they're staying in shape and they're ready to go. So that shows the commitment and the heart that some of these guys have. So let's move to our next offense. It's going to be the 1994 San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah, so the 49ers, led by MVP quarterback Steve Young, and arguably the best wide receiver in the history of the league, Jerry Rice. 49ers
There's no argument.
Exactly. The 49ers went 13-3 that season. They ranked 6th in rushing, 4th in passing, 2nd total offense. They're 1st in scoring by nearly a touchdown per game. They finished 1st in the NFC West for their division. This season, highlighted by the victory in the Super Bowl, number 29, which aside from, I believe, the Dolphins that we're discussing is the only team that won the Super Bowl out of the teams that we're discussing, because your Rams didn't and the Broncos didn't, that we're going to be discussing. They destroyed the Bears in their division playoff game that year. Then they beat the Cowboys, who they lost to the last 2 seasons previously in the conference championship, which a lot of people actually dubbed that the Super Bowl of that year, because AFC was actually kind of known to be a little bit weaker. So that Cowboys-Niners game, they always dubbed that pretty much the Super Bowl. But after they took out the Cowboys, they went on to beat the Chargers in the Super Bowl, and they beat them pretty bad. Prior to that season starting, they had made some acquisitions. They picked up Neon Sanders and Ken Norton, both from the Cowboys. Sanders was a major impact immediately. I know we're talking about offenses, though, but that definitely helps when you have defense on your side. Steve Young had his best NFL season. He won his 2nd MVP award. And at that time, he set an NFL record for the highest passer rating in a season, 112.8. Now, they had a slow start to the season at one point. Steve Young was actually benched for their backup, Elvis Gerback. And then abruptly in the third quarter, he started flipping out, started cussing on the sideline, shouting profanities at the head coach. And that actually kind of lit a fire under them. And then his teammates actually got behind him more. And it showed how much he actually really wanted to win. They had 10 Pro Bowlers from that team. They led the NFL with 66 touchdowns. They scored 505 points, which also led the NFL. Jerry Rice led in receiving yards. He also led in receptions. He also passed the famous Jim Brown's all-time touchdown record. The first week of that season, he actually scored 3 touchdowns against the Raiders to pass Jim Brown for the most touchdowns. Steve Young led with 35 touchdown passes. Again, his passer rating was 112.8. He also got NFL MVP. He got the Super Bowl MVP that year. And he threw for 6 touchdowns in the Super Bowl, which was a record for a Super Bowl game. This offense, the run game was a little bit weak, kind of like Brett's team that we had talked about. But Young and Rice, like the backup, the number 2, number 3 receiver, number 4, they weren't really that good. I mean, John Taylor was a 2 Super Bowl champion, and he was on that team. But Rice and Young, man, there was no stopping them by far. And they won the dance, and some of your other teams did not. So they finished what your teams could not.
Can't argue with Jerry Rice, that's for sure. Kevin, you brought up that running game. They didn't even average 4 yards per rush that season. You mentioned Brett's Patriots not being that good at rushing, but they did average over 4 yards. So, that's kind of the number you're looking for. Richmond, I mean, do you know anything about that offensive line? Was it just not a good run blocking team, or what are your thoughts on the 49ers?
Well, back then, from what I remember, was Ricky Waters there?
He was,
yeah. I remember, and even Ricky was a good running back, for them, the Eagles, but he was such a great guy that caught the ball out of the backfield that, they throw the little toss passes and, something 4 or 5 yards, he could turn into 15 and 20. And like you said, we all know about Jerry Rice. I seen Kevin's face just light up when, he was talking about him. Nobody's going to argue with you on that, Kevin. That guy that's the real deal. And we played them that year, and they came to Miami and they beat us. So we knew they were a very good team. And I have to agree with Kevin. The Super Bowl was just so lopsided, but that NFC Championship game, very physical, 2 teams that really didn't like each other, and that was probably the Super Bowl of that year. And I think Dallas had a couple of turnovers early, and the 49ers jumped out on them, but Dallas was making their way back, and I can remember Deion Sanders and Michael Irvin just having physical battles out there on the edge, and you got like Charles Haley and Eric Williams just banging. I mean, it was just, that was football. I mean, it was tough on our game, but they played the Chargers, and it just seemed like everything went wrong from the time they kicked off to them. I mean, it was just, they took them out of the game so early, and never had a chance to get back in it. And it might have been something like 55-10 or 14. It was a lopsided score. So I do remember that game. It was in Miami. So yeah, they was a real deal.
Brett, was this the season for Steve Young where when the season was over, he no longer had to look over his shoulder at the legend of Joe Montana? Was it like officially, hey, Steve Young, he's a great quarterback?
I believe so. Just because of the entire season, and of course his stamp was made, as Kevin said, in the Super Bowl with his 6 touchdown passes. I don't think he had anything to prove to anyone. As far as I know, I know the shadow that Montana can put out there, but as far as Steve Young goes, he definitely proved himself this year just by his performance.
And Brian, we haven't talked about your team yet, but you got a great kicker, Matt Prater, obviously. And then, Brett over there, he had Goskowski as a kicker. We look at the 49ers. Doug Bryan, he was a pretty good kicker, but that year he's only hitting 75% of his field goals. Is that kind of that could have hurt in a close game, right? So, I mean, is that going to take away from that offense?
I mean, it could have, but it didn't, just because of how potent it was. I mean, I remember that team just putting teams, like Richmond said, just putting teams away so quickly that they, didn't even really know what hit them, and it was so hard to recover. So, yeah, I mean, if there had been more close games, maybe it would have mattered, but, the way it turned out, it really didn't.
Okay. All right, let's move to our final team. That's going to be the 2013 Denver Broncos.
All right, 2013 Broncos. So the first thing that you think about this team is you think about Peyton Manning. And just to backtrack, 2011, Peyton Manning, he has a neck injury. He goes through surgery. People are talking about him that he's going to retire. Nobody knows what his future holds. Indianapolis gives up on him. Next season, Denver, they sign him. They decide to give him a chance. He comes back. He ends up being comeback player of the year. So then you bring in 2013, and I feel like, looking at Peyton Manning's great career, that this season was Peyton's peak. He ended up with the most passing yards in a season ever, 5,477. He ended up with the most touchdown passes in a season ever, with 55, which is 5 more than Tom Brady did. He ended up with the second best passer rating that season, and he ended up being the NFL MVP. So you look at who was protecting him in the offensive line. First off, early on in the season, it's only week 3, All-Pro Ryan Clady, he goes down. And everybody's wondering, is this offensive line, is it going to fold? It didn't. Luis Vasquez, he stepped up. He ended up being a first-team All-Pro. This team ended up leading the NFL with the lowest sack percentage at only 2.7%. And PFF ranked it the 3rd ranked unit in the entire league. Wide receivers, they ended up with not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 wide receivers that had double-digit touchdowns. At Demaryius Thomas, he had 1430 yards, 14 touchdowns. Eric Decker, 1288 and 11 touchdowns. Wes Welker, 778, 10 touchdowns. Julius Thomas, 788 and 12 touchdowns. So this wide receiver crew and tight end crew was just stacked. Then you had the backs. Noshawn Marino, he ended up with over 1,500 yards from scrimmage, and he scored 13 touchdowns. So you put it all together, they ended up setting the record, which is still the overall record, with 606 points scored in a season. That's an average of almost 38 points per game. They ended up on the season with 457 yards per game, 340 passing yards per game, and they had the top red zone offense of 76.1%, and they had the second best third down offense at 46.3%. Peyton Manning, he just came back with a vengeance. He went in there, and he was like, the best way to describe him is like an offensive coordinator on the field. This was the year of the Omaha. He stood up, he went up there. He's changing plays at the line. He sees a certain defense. He passes to this guy. He sees a certain defense. He checks down to a run. Peyton Manning had everything working in this season. Yeah, they ended up running into a really hot defense in the Super Bowl, but this offense was probably the most potent ever, in my opinion.
Richmond, everybody said going into that season, Peyton Manning coming off that neck surgery, that he's probably done. His career's over. They're just taking a shot at it. Maybe he still has it. Maybe he doesn't. I mean, what were your thoughts on somebody coming back from an injury like that? Were you expecting him to be as good as he was?
Yeah, when he first came in the league, I was still with the Dolphins, and I remember we played him early in the year, and I think we picked him off a couple times. But by the time we played him that second time, since we were in the same division, you could really see that he was picking things up, and he had picked it up really fast. But probably one of the smartest guys that ever played that position. But he had the talent, and the thing with Peyton was, it was a perfect example. Like you said, he spreaded the ball around. 4 receivers with double-digit, touchdowns. That's amazing. But he just knew when to check to a run, and then what he would do was go to a no huddle and speed it up to where you couldn't substitute on defense. And once he got those guys tired, he'd just run right down the field, and next thing you know, it was 6 points. But it was like you just really couldn't guess what he was going to do, and he's been using that Omaha since he came in. I remember you hear him on the sound clips from the NFL, Omaha, and sometimes he's fake checking, and it looks like he's checking out of a play, but it might still be the same play. So he was the master of disguise, and show you one thing, you think you got him, and next thing you know, he's going over the top. So I think the only thing I thought was he lost a little bit of arm strength, but as far as the mental and the preparation, majority of that season, he had an excellent season.
Kevin, of all the teams we're talking about tonight, is this the one that has like the best foursome of wide receivers?
Yeah, I'd have to say that. I know, it helps when you have a quarterback that's throwing for over 5,000 yards and 55 touchdowns. But, they made the routes to get open, and Peyton Manning had the precision passing. This was by far Peyton Manning's best season of his career. So to have that type of quarterback, it's going to elevate any wide receiver, regardless of their talent. But, yeah, the wide receivers were definitely top-notch that season, and it showed with 55 touchdowns.
Yeah. Brian mentioned Wes Welker, who was also on the team you represented. How important is it to have, Wes isn't your typical wide receiver. So how important is it to have a wide receiver that plays like the style that he does?
I think it's extremely important, and I would say especially in today's league, which is speed. Real quickly, just touching on that, we look back to the San Francisco 49ers, and I think the league was so much more physical back then. Not that it isn't now, but just the defense is everything. And then you fast forward to now, and I think having a little speed receiver like that can make quick routes and help your quarterback, like we were talking about with the checkdowns. He would get open. He knew whether it was Brady or Manning, he'd get open. They could check down to him, and they'd make that pass. And you look across the leagues of any of the teams right now that are doing well, that are performing at the top, and almost all of them have a receiver. Tyreek Hill could go deep or short just because of his speed, but he's the small receiver. He's got the speed. He can get open, help his quarterback out. And Wes Welker was one of the best, I think, sometimes a little underrated or, not as respected, but he did what he was supposed to do in the league.
Exactly. All right, we're going to do our trivia question for a prize, and then we'll do our honorable mention, our 1 minute honorable mention, and then we'll go for our vote. So trivia question, got to be a member of the Facebook group to win. So if you haven't joined the Facebook group already, make sure you join it. Put your answers in the comments section. In the TV show Coach, name the college and NFL team that Hayden Fox coached, and name the U.S. music chart's #1 hit song sung by the actress who played his wife. So you get all 3 of those, we'll get your prize mailed out to you. All right, let's move into our honorable mentions. We'll start with Kevin for your honorable mention.
So I went with the 99 Rams, and I know I took some heat when I picked this team, but they were first in yards per game, averaging over 400 yards per game. First in passing yards per game, 272 that year. Fifth in rushing, 128. First in points per game, almost 33 points per game. A Bleacher Report writer actually ranked them as the second best offense of all time, right behind the 2013 Broncos. The 2000 and 2001 Rams, they had more yardage, but the 99 Rams did something that the 2000 Rams did not. They won a Super Bowl. The other Rams teams did not. And the 99 Rams was the first greatest show on turf. They were the ones that started that. The Rams were stacked. They had Falk, who went over 1,000 yards rushing and receiving. Isaac Bruce was over 1,000 yards Holt and the other backup wide receiver, Hakeem, averaged 14 touchdowns. Kurt Warner passed for over 4,000 yards, 41 touchdowns. He won league MVP honors. The 99 Rams were a constant barrage. They finished the job. They won the Lombardi Trophy. And in fact, the three of the main teams that we talked about did not win that trophy.
Okay. Brett?
All right. So you like how I tied it in with my last little that I was talking about with Tyreek. Well, I took the 2018 Kansas City Chiefs, and I will say this confidently right now that team, that group of players will go down by the time they're all done as one of the greatest offenses to play together as a whole over an extended period of time. I mean, you look, Patrick Mahomes that year threw 50 touchdown passes, basically took the NFL by storm. Nobody could, cover. Nobody could figure out what he was trying to do. He brought a whole new style to the league, and he was young and he was confident, and nobody could stop him. And then you have Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt quietly didn't break 1,000 yards, but he broke 1,000 scrimmage yards, but rushing yards he did not. And he had 14 touchdowns that year, Kareem Hunt. And then, of course, you move to the wide receivers. Tyreek Hill, still tearing up the league to this day. And then, of course, what will go down is probably one of the best tight ends to ever play the game, Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce had over 1,000 yards that season, double-digit touchdowns, and they just pretty much tore apart. And again, kind of almost out of nowhere because nobody knew really what to expect much from Mahomes. And I'll say it, the 2018 Kansas City Chiefs will have a place in history.
Brian, go ahead.
Well, I got the 83 Skins, and they are a team with a lot of nicknames. You had the Fun Bunch. It was the nickname for the wide receivers, Art Monk, Charlie Brown, Alvin Garrett, and Don Warren. They were very good. Art Monk's in the Hall of Fame. Then you had the Hogs, which was a nickname for the offensive line. You had Joe Jacoby, Russ Grimm, Jeff Bostic, Mark May. 3 of the 4 of those guys were Pro Bowlers. Then you had the Diesel, John Riggins, who scored 24 touchdowns that year. Then you had the NFL MVP, Joe Theismann, behind center. You put it all together, and they set the NFL record at that time for points with 541, which was almost 34 points per game, which that was very significant back in 1983 when points weren't scored as much as frequently as they are now.
Definitely not scored as frequently. So I got the 1972 Miami Dolphins. That year they averaged 359.7 yards per game. That was tops in the NFL that season. They had 2 1,000-yard rushers with Larry Zonka and Mercury Morris. And Jim Glick added 500 more yards. That's a lot of rushing yards for one team. A lot of people say, oh, well, they couldn't throw the ball very well. But, Earl Morrell that year was a first-team All-Pro. I know Bob Greasy filled in at the end of the season there or whatever, but they had a first-team All-Pro quarterback. But those 3 running backs scored 23 touchdowns between the 3 of them. That's pretty good for that time period. They had wide receiver Paul Warfield. He was a Pro Bowler, and this team can say something that no other team that we've talked about tonight can say. They never lost. So undefeated Super Bowl champs. Richmond, you played on some really good offensive teams. Is there an honorable mention you wanted to kick out?
I'll throw one. I want to say it's not one of my team's personal, but from what I remember, it was the Minnesota Vikings, and I think it was around, I want to say 96 or 97, but Chris Carter, Jake Reed, Randy Moss, and I believe Randall Cunningham was the quarterback.
Right,
Yeah, I think it was 98.
It was 98. Yeah, they went like 15-1 and lost to Atlanta. I'm pretty sure they had almost 3 1,000-yard receivers. I know Moss and Carter had it, but I just remember the impact, and I thought they were going to go to the Super Bowl, and the Dirty Birds down there in Atlanta, came and beat them. But
Gary Anderson shanked it.
Yeah, it just seemed like, Randall Cunningham could just drop back and just throw it far as he could. And either Moss, Carter, or Jake Reed. Somebody was going to run up on it and catch it. So that was a pretty good team. I don't have the stats on it, but I remember that was a very good Minnesota Vikings team.
And Brian, I'm sure you can tell me, wasn't Robert Smith at running back on that team?
Yeah.
Robert Smith, yeah, he was the running back.
Great running back.
One little thing I'll throw in was we all knew the Randall Cunningham before that was a runner, a guy who had mobility with the Eagles. But then after his injuries, he no longer really had the mobility. That's what really made that Vikings team remarkable, because Cunningham had to do it all with his arm and with his wits, and that was a really good offense.
All right, so let's move into our vote. Our options are the 2007 Patriots, the 1994 49ers, the 2000 Rams, and the 2013 Broncos. Kevin, who are you taking?
I'm gonna have to go with the 2013 Broncos. That passing game, all those wide receivers, 55 touchdowns. I mean, that downfield threat. Welker was one of the best slot receivers, to play the game that I can remember. I mean, he would always get open in the slot. So I'm going with the Broncos.
Okay, Brian.
Well, yeah, I can't go with the Broncos. So I'll go with the Patriots. That when Randy Moss showed up there, man, did that change everything. They all of a sudden had this deep threat. Welker was able to sit down there on the check downs and the short yardage stuff. Man, they were just, Brady just had a dream season that year.
Okay, Brett.
And this is getting difficult. Yeah, I can't go with the Patriots either. Mike, we're going to be really leaving this up to you last two to really choose here, because I'm actually going to go with the 94 49ers, just because, of course, Jerry Rice, greatest ever play at that position. Steve Young throwing the ball, what they did. And again, I'm not that I don't like the league now as far as the speed and how many points are scored, but I love the old school. My Tampa Bay Buccaneers won with just a bruising defense. And so I like the physicality back then. And I think what they did in the league that year, to me, was impressive.
So I'm going to go with I'm going with the Patriots. Tom Brady, he's the GOAT. All these are Hall of Fame quarterbacks, but I think Brady in 07 was just the best quarterback in the game. I think he was even better than Manning back then. And when you gave him weapons, we saw how good he was with weapons. He didn't have weapons last year in New England. Comes to Tampa, has weapons this year. Guys thrown all over again. So he's just an amazing quarterback, and I love their rotation at running backs. How they played them in and out, and you had one that was, you got your blocker, you got your runner, you got your third down back, the one who's going to make the catch, so just a all around very good offense, and obviously Welker was in there too. So Richmond, on you, who you taking?
You know what? It's just man, you could pick any one of them, and you wouldn't really be wrong. But I'm old school like Brett, and I'm gonna go with those guys. I was in the league, so I'm gonna go with the 49ers with Steve Young and Rice and Ricky Waters. That group there. Like I said, all of them. I wish you could kind of match it up and play. I'm sure he scored probably about 120 points going against each other. But like I said, y'all picked four really good offenses that you could make an argument anyway. But I'm gonna just go old school, and I'm gonna go with the 49ers.
So there you go. We got one for the Broncos, two for the 49ers, and two for the Patriots.
Can I make a comment?
Another show that technically doesn't have a win. Go ahead, Kevin.
I think by default, there should be an asterisk next to the Patriots, Spygate 2007. The 49ers should win.
Had to bring out the dirt, didn't you?
Yeah. There you go. Kevin always bringing out the dirt. All right, so let's move into our Q&A here with Richmond. You'll ask him some questions about his career. Brian, go ahead and start us out.
Richmond, when I look at your resume, so to speak, 7 Pro Bowls, 4-time All-Pro selection, 1990s All-Decade team. When I look at all these accolades, I personally think Pro Football Hall of Fame. Have you ever given any thought to that? Do you think that you deserve it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I get asked that question a lot, and like someone alluded earlier, I think I'll get in there, but some get right in, but sometimes it just takes time to get in there. And what I let people know is, I'm not the only guy that's waiting there. You look at the guys that's on the list that hadn't made it in. Just like these 4 offenses, get some great guys that had great careers that, they can only, when they only put in 6, 7 guys in time, some guys will get in immediately and some's going to take a while, but I think I got a legitimate shot and I think I'll eventually make it in there.
Okay. So Richmond, I got a kind of a off the wall question for you here. Take you back to 1995.
Oh, okay.
So you're in a car crash
okay.
with your truck, and your truck is totaled, and somehow you only walk out with a bruised knee and a cut lip. Fill me in on that.
Man, this guy, I was headed to work. I was headed to practice, and I was driving. I guess I was heading north, and the street kind of bend around where it had a little bow or a curve in it. So it was an older gentleman driving like a white panel work van, and all of a sudden he just started easing out, and then he stopped, and then I changed lanes from it was lanes, so I went all the way to the left, but he stopped, started back. So I was trying to miss him, but it was just too late. So I hit him and ended up totaling my truck, and Coach Hill wanted me to practice and stuff, but he sent me to get checked out, make sure everything was okay. But I think we played Buffalo that weekend. I ended up I had a little bruised knee, and the lip wasn't no big deal. I might have got a stitch or two, and was just fortunate I was able to play, but it could have really been worse. And man, I don't know where you pull that up at, but man, you dug deep in the archives for that one there, because I was like, wait a minute, but yeah, I totaled my truck and stuff, but thank God, it wasn't nothing serious. And I stayed and made sure the ambulance and got that guy situated. It was unfortunate, but everybody came out all right. That was the main thing. But yeah, that's definitely off the wall. I hadn't heard that story. That's the first time I heard that, I think, in an interview. That's pretty good.
Well, I read that somebody, you had to call the team to come pick you up.
Yeah, I think I caught the guy, Stu Weinstein was he was a guy, he was security for years, and that was who if anything happened, that was the first guy you called. And back then, we played, the last thing you want to do is be late. And I knew I think I was more worried about being late and possibly getting fined rather than am I okay? You know what I'm saying? So I was trying to call, like, Stu, this is what happened. I want to make it up. And he said, well, I'm going to come down. And he did come down, check on and make sure everything was all right. So, Dolphins first class organization. But yeah, that was, you took me back on that one, bro.
All right, Brett, go ahead.
All right, Richmond. In obviously 1990, you were selected 9th overall. And my question kind of just goes a little deeper into draft day, draft night, whatever you want to call it. What are the feelings leading up to that, and then being selected, in the top 10 picks of that draft? What's the feelings, and how did everything go that night or day?
Well, the draft has changed. It's a Broadway show compared to what I went through back in 1990. What I remember, the draft was on Sunday morning, and I think they did, I can't remember how many, it was 12 rounds back then, but the first day was Sunday, the next day was Monday. But I can remember getting up early that morning, and it was Chris Berman, Tom Jackson, I believe Mike Ditka, I believe Theismann was on there, and of course Mel Kiper. So that was the analyst on the thing. But I remember the Dolphins. I want to say the Raiders called me, and I want to say the Saints, and everybody said, if you're there, we're gonna take you. You know, when the pick comes. So I think the Dolphins had the first pick, and man, the draft started, and I think Jeff George was the first guy, and then they took Blair Thomas. He was running back out of Penn State. And then my good friend Cortez Kennedy was the third pick. Who was the fourth pick? Fourth pick was Keith McCants. He went to Tampa Bay out of Alabama, linebacker. Fifth pick was Junior Sal, and I knew it was a possibility I thought at one time early on I was going to go to San Diego, but when he announced he was coming out, I stopped hearing about San Diego, so that's probably not going to happen. So after that, the analysts started, and they said, I think the Bears had the next pick, and they was like, they could use a lineman. They might take Richmond Webb, this and that. And so you wait, and then they took Mark Carey, a defensive back out of USC. So then the seventh pick was Andre Ware. I played against him from U of H. He was a Heisman Trophy winner. They ran the run and shoot. And so the eighth pick was Chris Singleton. But back then it was like 15 minutes in between each pick, and each team took up the 15 minutes. So you're really nervous because your name just keeps coming up, and then they take somebody else, and they took Chris Singleton. And as soon as they took him, my phone rang. And I was at home in Dallas at my parents' house. My brother and sister was there, and I'm just watching it because I didn't want to go to New York. It was a few guys went back then, but I always remember, like, sometime it would always be somebody slide on draft day, and the cameras would just focus on that guy. And I'm like, that's the time. You know, I was like, if I slide, I do not want to be there. I could just be at home. And I had a couple of cameras there from local, I think maybe NBC or somebody. It was local news media from Dallas. But as soon as they took Chris Singleton, my phone rang, and it was Coach Shula. He said, "Hey, you ready to be a Dolphin?" I said, "Yes, sir." So, man, I could breathe. You know, your heart be right. It's almost like if you're, and I've heard this from people that like hunt, and say you see a 10 or 12 point big buck or something, they say the adrenaline. So, man, my heart was racing, but I started to calm down, but I still had to wait 15 minutes before they announced the pick. I was just sitting there, and he was like, "We're going to take you, this and that." But once that was over, I could breathe, man. But before that, I was a nervous wreck, bro, because, you know, people tell you that, but you until it really happens, you just wait and hoping it happens.
Awesome.
Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, so I saw that you had actually set some team records for the Dolphins. You started 118 games in a row and made 7 consecutive Pro Bowls. That's pretty impressive. And I saw your rookie year. You played every snap your rookie year. And you faced a lot of big defensive ends and linebackers, such as Bruce Smith. So just out of curiosity, like, when you got up to that line, who was like the most defensive person that you were like kind of, I mean, I don't want to say you were scared, but
Yeah.
like, which one were you like worried about going up against the most out of all the ones you played?
You know, it was a lot. Definitely Bruce Smith. We played the Eagles that year, but thank goodness Reggie was on the other side. But I think Jerome Brown was over Keith Sims, and Clyde Simmons. He was a really good pass rusher, but probably didn't get the credit because that D line was just so great. Played against Chris Dolman. You know, I had heard against him, and then of course, I think the third game I played against the Giants, and they had LT, so everybody knew who LT. So it's like it was wild, because it's like you see these guys on TV, you know, watch them, this and that, and the next thing you know, this guy is lining up and you can't hear, and this guy is trying to come kill your quarterback. So That was cool. I think the coolest thing though was when I made the Pro Bowl and I actually got to talk to those guys over there in Hawaii. That what was cool, because it's like, man, I'm over here with all these. I was there, but I was like just happy to be around all them, because I'm like, man, y'all been doing this for a while. So that made that. I think that was it. But it seemed like every week, bro, it was, if it wasn't one guy, it was another one, and that I survived. That's all I can tell you. I made it through it.
Brian.
Well, sadly, back in May, your coach Don Shula, he passed away. Can you tell us what Don Shula, what he meant to you, and what kind of a coach, what kind of a man he was?
Oh, yeah, that's the sad thing, and I'm sure a lot of people feel this way, but with COVID, we really wasn't able to give him honor that he really deserved by going to the services, and so that really that hurt me, because you want to go pay respects when the guy's giving so much, but he was more than a coach. He's a philanthropist, big part of molding me into the man that I am today. Coach Shula, he always stressed giving back to people that was less fortunate than us. So when I got in the NFL, that was what we did. Whether it was real big with United Way, community service, this and that, and then it just taught discipline, and some of the stuff he taught in coaching. Even after he got out of coaching, he started opening up the steakhouses, restaurants, and stuff like. So he was successful and able to transition from being, probably the greatest coach in the NFL to, going into another business and being successful. But it was the same principles and techniques that he had used all his life, and then some of those were instilled in me, and I reflect back on them, and they're in me. So I use them today. So just learned so much from him. But yeah, that's the thing that really hurts, is that wasn't able to go and honor him. And I know I'm not the only one, but it's so many people have lost loved ones during this time that you can't go back and celebrate them like you can, or give them the honor that you feel that they're due.
Brett.
So I guess I know it's going to be hard to kind of pick one, but I would like to know, what is probably one of the biggest life lessons, like if you had to tell young athletes that are coming up right now in football, or really any sport, what's one of the biggest life lessons you learned going through your career?
Biggest one, and I learned it early on, and it just stuck with me, and it was actually from Marino, and we were talking. I think we had lost in the playoffs my rookie year, and we were flying back. I think we was in Buffalo, and we were flying back, and guys like, oh, we'll be back here next year, this and that. And he was like, he said, man, he said, I went to the Super Bowl my rookie year, lost, and he said, I'll be back here next year. He said, it's been like 8 years I hadn't made it back. So he said, whenever you get that opportunity, you got to make the most of it, because you're not guaranteed to ever get back. And that stuck with me, because I think when you're young, a lot of times you just don't think about that. You say, oh, we were close, we lost, but we'll be back next year. And it was time. We had really good teams early on, and then a bunch of injuries with hitting key positions, and just knocked us out the playoffs. So the thing I would do is, if you get there, make sure you leave everything on the line, and make sure you prepare and know your assignments and stuff like that, and try to have the best game possible, because it's not guaranteed that you ever get that opportunity again. And Marino got it one time, but I never got that opportunity. So that's one thing that always stuck with me. Say, hey man, when you get there, don't take it for granted.
Kevin.
So, kind of wanted to know, college games, they seem to be pretty, I don't know, more exciting, camaraderie, in the stadium and whatnot. Can you just tell us kind of like the difference between the atmospheres between the college football going to NFL football?
Yeah, for me, like I think it's in college, it's the traditions, this and that. You got the band, people tailgate in both of them, but I think the college experience is just different. The thing that made it real for me was, in college, you got guys on scholarship, this and that. You got 80 guys. Well, my rookie year, you go to camp back then with like 80 guys, and then you got to cut down to 53. So next thing you know, you might walk in there and somebody's name tag has been removed or whatever, and you like, it kind of lets you know, man, this is a business. If you don't take it for serious, just like they move that guy's name tag, if you don't produce, you could be gone. It's when they say it's not for long, it's not for long. So that was the big thing. And then in the NFL games, they don't have the band. They have cheerleaders, but I just remember the traditions. A&M was a school big on traditions, so the band would play, and it just seemed like they would hype us up and stuff. But in the NFL, you just got to be ready to go. But I like the college game too. I like NFL, but I do like that about the college game. It just seems like it's more fun. People interacting, this and that, and all that. So yeah, it is different.
We'll get you out of here with this question tonight. This is a two-part question.
Okay.
So, first part is, what was it like transitioning from Dan Marino out of, when he retired out of quarterback? I'm sure that was a big transition for the team. And then, can you just tell us a little bit about your cousin, Jamarcus?
Yeah. I think the biggest transition really was not so much Dan's last year, but when Jimmy Johnson came in, and he was truly focused on having more of a balanced attack and establishing the running game. So the biggest thing was when I first got there, Marino was kind of like Peyton Manning. He could check off, he seen something, he could do it, where a lot of that was taken away from him when Jimmy got there, because he really wanted to focus on getting the running game going. But the biggest thing was we still, I think we won the division after Dan left, but it was different. We had Jay Fiedler, and he didn't have the arm that Marino had, but he was mobile, so we did some different things, and we were successful. And I think at that time, our defense was really, really strong. We had, Sam Madison, Surtain on the corners, Zach, Darryl Gardner, and Tim Bowens in the middle, the big tackles. We had JT, Jason Taylor, and Trace Armstrong was the other guy, and then Brock Marion. So the defense was really, really good, and we just had to manage it right, and I think we ended up going 11-5 that year. And then part two was Jamarcus. I found out we were cousins right before he went into the NFL, and the way I found out was I actually knew his agent that was representing him, still represents him. And so they said, we met this kid, his last name is Webb. And I said, really? And I said, what's it, Jamarcus Webb? I said, no, because I had never met him or anything. And the way I would find out is I said, okay, who is his dad or who is his granddad? Because my parents come from East Texas, a little small town in East Texas. So that's where everything kind of branches out from there. And when he told me his granddad's name, and I called my dad and I said, hey, are we related to so-and-so, or so-and-so? And he was like, yeah. And I said, okay. So I called him back and said, yeah, we're cousins. So I found out maybe right before he went in the NFL that we were hanging around for a little bit. So I'm just happy he's did that. And I just told him, hey man, be smart with your money, this and that. But he's had a pretty long career. So I said, hey man, just ride it long as you can ride it. I said, because it goes a lot faster than what you really think. I said, before I knew it, I was at 10 years. I was like, man, where'd the time go? But
yeah.
I told him just, yeah.
Well, thank you, Richmond, for joining us tonight. If anybody is out there watching this that is involved in the NFL Hall of Fame voting, this guy is a Hall of Famer. Okay. 7 Pro Bowls, you know, all the first team All Pros, the second team All Pros. I don't even know why this is a conversation. Put this man in the Hall of Fame. Okay, this guy belongs in there. But thank you so much for joining us tonight. So it's always good to hear, you know, hear the old war stories and stuff like that. We appreciate you answering all our questions. We'll remind everybody to subscribe to the YouTube channel and make sure you join the Facebook group page. And we'll be back with more shows in the future. So thank you and good night.
Thank you, Richmond.
Thank you, Rich.
Really appreciate it.
Hey, man, I appreciate it. It was fun. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks so much, Richmond. My personal thank you.